Hey, I'm Alex.
Hey, I'm Parv, and this
Is Trying to Product.
we are two Silicon Valley product managers, and we know how messy it can be.
So we're here to talk about the ups and downs of being a PM. It's not always straightforward, but we're here to figure it out together.
On today's episode of Trying to Product, Alex, we're going to do something different. I know both of us, you and I, have gotten a lot of questions over the past years around just PM in general from like friends, families, but there are a couple of questions that I feel like I keep hearing quite a lot. And even as we've been doing these episodes, I've heard some of those questions come up from listeners and just in general, like people, coming up to me as I'm part of interview panels or just part of like general conversations. And I thought we would just like walk through some of those questions here on this episode, look at those couple of most popular ones that have come up and just answer them for our audience.
Yeah, let's do it.
You ready for it?
Yeah.
So the first question that I get, and I am 100% sure that you get, is the day in the life of a PM.
Oh, yeah. This is like a very common interview question too. And the reality is it varies so much. I think as we talked about in the past is essentially there's maybe like three types of days that you have. There's like just meetings, like 9 to 5, basically just all meetings all day. Then you have the fires. So essentially like something broke or something went wrong and you got to figure out how to fix it. And then the last one is probably like more rare, but the most appreciated, which is like the focus days. So I think, yeah, each one is like very different in like what you do and the amount of stress that you have to deal with. Focus days are the ideal state where you can just kind of get some time to think.
Yeah.
But what's been your experience?
I think that's the same that I would also say. You have like those, as you said, packed with meetings, packed with fires, or packed with actual work. But yeah, I mean, if I were to say an average day in the life of a PM, like how would you say that goes for you?
I'd say like 9 a.m. meetings, 10 a.m. more meetings, 11 a.m. meetings, 12 lunch. No, someone booked a meeting. So
Yeah. Okay.
And then in that, you try to like during meetings, you're trying to like reply to emails, reply to
Yeah.
chats, like do some of your actual work while also being on the meetings. And then normally around like 4 or 5, like things kind of ramp down.
Mm-hmm.
And then you actually like reply to emails, write the specs, write the requirements, write the one pagers,
Yeah.
write the communication.
Yeah.
Like actually do the work that you were trying to do all day, but you couldn't get to because of meetings.
Yeah. In terms of those meetings, like I'll give you an example. Again, I get this question a lot as well. So for me, when I think about like a day in the life or one of those typical meeting filled days, I think it's usually, I mean, again, the mornings are for me, like at my current job, I think it's more around like stand-ups. You're meeting with the engineering, design people, like early morning, having a daily check-in. So like that's one, usually a stand-up, figuring out like what's happening, where we're at with certain projects, different milestones. And then that's usually followed by, like, at least I try and get in some time with design on most of my days, trying to like work through design comps or like have design reviews with the broader group or with just a designer. And that's a meeting too, but more of a working session kind of thing. And then I think usually like maybe a couple of 1 or 2 meetings which are dedicated with engineering, like deep diving on a specific piece of a project, trying to like go in, understanding like how we can build something, how we want to like approach a particular solution. Maybe, of course, not defining solutions as a PM, but being part of those conversations to be able to understand like dependencies, any other stakeholders that might need to be involved. Then I think one of the other things that usually fall within the day of the life is like just jumping in, always having a quick look at the metrics that you're responsible for. So yeah, meetings with design, engineering, usually during the day, stand-ups, data check-ins. And I think the rest is mostly like, depending on where you are with different projects, just like a different stakeholder meeting, mostly like different type of stakeholder meetings throughout the day.
I guess mine is like mostly probably reviews.
Oh,
than anything
interesting.
else. And it's not so much like meeting with design or meeting with engineering or meeting with any one group. It's almost always just like these stakeholder reviews. Essentially, it's mostly just reviews of work. And
Oh,
essentially
interesting.
just kind of chiming in and making sure everything's on track. I think the ideal state is that you get to work with the team. You get to like check in, make sure they're doing work, go to stand up.
Yeah.
But for me, it's very rare I can actually attend the team stand up just because of all the reviews.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it depends on where you are. Because like in previous roles, I would be like having like the engineering meetings in the morning, having the design reviews, working with stakeholders. It'd be a very similar kind of day. I think it kind of talks to like how different PM roles are
Yeah. Yeah.
at different companies. Like for me, it's almost all reviews at this point. Previous role is very similar where you're working with those
So
actual
what's
teams.
usually like when you're having those reviews during your day? Like, is it usually just comp reviews, design reviews, or is it mostly like higher level project milestone reviews?
So for us, we're like building a lot of pages right now,
Uh-huh.
like a lot of web pages to sell a product. So it's almost always just reviewing those. And it's been like that for me, at least since December,
Oh, interesting.
because we're constantly building new pages and they have to align with the metrics. So ensuring
Got
that
it.
they are going to convert well, that they are
Interesting.
essentially
Yeah,
optimized
yeah.
for conversion, that kind of thing. So for me, it's like making sure that I'm in these 1-2 hour reviews and I'm able to chime in and make sure that everything aligns with the
Oh,
top level strategy. So more maybe babysitting than anything else. It's less like design and working kind of
like
back and
less
forth.
work sessions, more review sessions.
Exactly,
Kind of thing.
exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. That's such a good point, right? It is so different. I think that speaks to just how different PM roles can be at different organizations. You're either part of like these huge reviews and versus being part of work sessions, which connects to the second question that we get quite a lot is, how do you choose a company to be a PM at?
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those things where you kind of get to decide is like what type of work environment or what type of work structure do you want to be part of? And I think that's one of the elements you want to think about, right? As being a PM, I
Absolutely.
enjoy those work sessions quite a lot. So when you
I
say
think me too.
when you say like those longer reviews, I'm like, yeah, I'm maybe okay not having a lot of those 2 hour, 3 hour review sessions. But yeah, so that's another question. Like, what do you think? Like, how do you choose a company to be a PM in?
Yeah, I think like the day that you have is a really important factor because like that's where you're spending all of your time. So like, do you want to sit and be in reviews, or do you want to actually be like working on like building something and like figuring out the specs and figuring out kind of like more of the fun stuff?
Yeah.
At least what I think is more of the fun stuff. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Is like as part of the interview process, probably ask like, what is your normal day? Because like every role I've had has been a very different day. Like I was working at a startup years ago, and that startup essentially like my day would start at like 9 a.m. with like a client call. And then I would like basically have like nothing until the afternoon when like essentially the engineers roll in and it's a much like kind of later kind of culture. So essentially I have like 3 hours of like focused working time. And then essentially from like maybe 2 p.m. until like maybe 8 or 9, I'd be working with the engineers, with the designers, especially because everyone was like, a lot of people were in China because it's a hardware company. Then you're working with the engineers on the China team. So like every single role has very different kind of things that you get to do, people that you get to interact with, things that you get to learn. Early in your career, you want to focus on learning more than anything else. So to that question, like, how do you choose a company as a PM? Like, I think the day is like one part of it, but I think there's many different
Yeah, 100%.
variables.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, I think learning is a big one for sure, right? It's you choosing a company to be a PM at, you want to understand like how much you can learn, what you can learn, like, and it should align with stuff that you want to learn about as well. I think one of the other things when I think about how to choose a company as a PM is I think the industry and space also matters. Of course, maybe there is a company where it's great to be a PM, but if you aren't really excited about the space or the industry, then I feel that you can suffer there as a PM because a lot of your work tends to be specialized within that domain and industry. And while your skills will take you far enough, if that's something that doesn't excite you, me personally, I think it'll make me suffer and not be a good PM because I can't think about like what I want to build next or how we should be building or, like have those strategy conversations because that space just doesn't excite me or like I have no knowledge about that.
And you're also going to like start falling behind because you're not spending your free time kind of learning about it
Yeah,
and getting excited about it. I think that's like a larger part of like if you're excited about a space, like it doesn't feel like work just to like read news or listen to podcasts about that area and to continue learning on the side.
Yeah, so I think that would be one as well. When I say how to choose a company as a PM, definitely the work style that we talked about, that's a good question to ask in your interviews is like, what is the work style? I remember in one of the interviews, I had a question which was like, hey, how often do you interact with other designers and engineers? And I actually got the answer was like, you most likely will never have to talk to a designer. And I was like, that is weird. Although I can imagine roles where that is something that is not that frequent. Like maybe you are part of a hardcore engineering platform team or like a tool team, which is not too heavy on design emphasis, which is fair. Like, and I've seen those roles and I know people who are really enjoying those roles because they really enjoy the technical solution part of it. Those are some of the questions you want to ask and help choose being a PM. And then even small things like, do you prefer B2C? Do you prefer B2B2C? As you said, like if you're at B2B2C, then one of the meetings or stakeholders you are involved with is the client or the business is. Like, is that something you want to work with? Is that something you don't enjoy? Those are also kind of questions, right?
And like the size of the company, like you're going to learn a ton at smaller companies, but you get paid less, and like there's all these other things you have to figure out.
There's also the compensation part. I'm just kidding. No, like how much you get paid. No, that's.
But I think
sometimes part of it, not always.
Yeah, no, I think there's so many different variables, and I think it really depends on like what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Like, what is the industry you're interested in? What is like the size? Like how much do you want to learn? And like I think to your point, like, I mean the compensation, like there's maybe like three things and you can pick one. It's like, do you want time? Do you want money? Or do you want to learn stuff?
Yeah.
And I think like earlier in your career, you always want to lean on learning because the learning will then compound, and then you'll be able to earn more if that's your goal, or you'll have more time if that's your goal. So I think there's maybe like a trifecta of those three things. You can pick two of them.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's, I think, life as well, right? You have time, money, or learning. Which two do you want to choose? Yeah, I think that's a fun way. So I think it all speaks to sometimes being aware of your internal cues and what really brings joy to you as a PM, and then making sure you ask those questions in your interviews as well. Because it's very important choosing a company where you want to be a PM also. What else? The other third question, one of the most popular ones is, I mean, I've heard this again. I know these are all popular questions, but this one I've heard it being asked on other podcasts and other interviews, is just, do I need technical skills as a PM? And I think when people say technical skills, one of them is like, do I need to know how to code?
That's like the number one
I know,
question.
Right? Yeah. But there's also like, do I need to know how to design? Do I need hardcore skills like engineering or design to be a PM?
Yeah. I think it's like one of those things where like it doesn't hurt. It's definitely helpful. And especially if you can lean on it, the team will trust you more.
Yeah.
I think if you're like an MBA, I think a lot of teams have trouble trusting an MBA because the MBA is like often like more detached from the product itself. Now, if you're an MBA with coding experience, with production coding experience, or with some type of technical skill that you can lean on, I think it helps. But I think there's like maybe two ways to approach it. Doesn't hurt. It's always good to learn it. There's no downside. So, if you have an opportunity, of course, learn it. But if you don't, then like don't necessarily dictate. Because I think something that kind of grates the team or rubs the team the wrong way is often like when a PM will come in and say like, we have to do it this way. And the engineers will be like, no, or the designers will be like, no, like we can't because of this. And I think a lot of times not having that kind of technical background makes it so it's harder to understand what decisions are the trade-offs earlier on. So you're almost floating like not dumb ideas, but more naive ideas to the team, whereas having more of a technical background can kind of help ground some of the thought process.
I do want to say that it's not at all a necessity.
Yeah, I think it depends on like the level of technical. Like you don't need to know how to code.
Yeah.
But you have to know the trade-offs of like one route versus another.
Maybe, yeah, that's fair.
That's not something that's technical. Or it's not something you need to know how to code. It's something that you gain with more time in the like working with engineers, working with and making products.
Yeah. These are things that you can always read about and pick up and understand. It's not necessarily, as you said, right? I don't need to know how to write an API, but having a knowledge or a working knowledge or it's just a basic understanding of what an API is won't hurt. So I think it's not necessary to have actual coding skills or actual like pen to paper design skills, but just being aware of some of those trade-offs, aware of some technologies, how certain things work, and same principles in design. I think those help.
100%.
They do. And the good thing is that those skills can be picked up anytime, anywhere. In fact, on your way to your office, you can quickly pick up like what an API is or how does a blockchain work, things like that. It's very easy to pick up those kind of topics.
You have to understand like how it works, why you would use it. Like essentially then you can frame your thinking around that. You don't have to know like technically like how do you implement, how do you like fork Ethereum and make a new like blockchain. You don't have to know that. But you have to know that like you can do that because that's helpful because then essentially you can kind of plot the requirements based off of these.
And it sometimes just helps having conversations with engineering. Even if you don't know something, just being aware of it helps you ask the right questions with other stakeholders. So I think definitely not a hard skill that you need, but something that might help.
Yeah, I think also like if you're not technical, don't act like you are. I think that's also something I see a lot is like where you're having a conversation with the engineer and a lot of it's going over your head and you're acting like you understood what they said and they're pretty sure you don't know what they're saying, but you just kind of nod your head and then like you get back to your desk and you're like, no idea what we just agreed on. Like that's often worse. It's better just to own up to it because the team often already knows. They already know
ask those questions.
So just
no one's judging.
Ask the dumb questions. It's better to like ask the dumb questions and kind of lean into it rather than trying to act like you know something that you don't know.
There is no dumb question.
Well, there's definitely dumb
No,
questions.
no.
But no. I think it's better to own up to it than to like act like you understood what they're saying when you didn't, because then you're just gonna diverge and like you're gonna have agreed to something that you don't necessarily know what you agreed to. And I see like that happens a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's, as you said, right? It's always okay owning up, asking the questions, even to just align on the same page. Like, I've had moments where I've asked my engineering team, like, when we've got into the weeds of something and there are questions which I'm not necessarily aware of, or like some of the technical capabilities. I've taken like 30 minutes in a day. Like, I've asked them, hey, do you mind, if you schedule some time one-on-one? I would just love to learn a bit more.
They appreciate it.
Yeah. 100%. It's important. And I think it helps build that relationship, helps build the trust. And you often they use the context of the product to explain some of those things, which actually ends up going a really long way, because then it opens up understanding of different areas within the product itself. So yeah, again, don't need hard technical skills. I think that's the takeaway, but basic knowledge, understanding is always helpful.
I think 100%. So I guess another question is like, how do you deal with meeting fatigue when you have those days?
Your 9 a.m. meeting, your 10
9
a.m.
a.m.
meeting.
to 10 a.m. to all the way to 5 p.m.
That's a good question. And I think that's one area of concern that comes up quite a lot with aspiring PMs and just generally folks who are trying to like shift into PMs is you're always in meetings all the time. Like, how does any work get done? Like, aren't you tired? And I'm going to admit it. There are days where I do come out of a day feeling very tired and fatigued from just having back-to-back meetings. And, it makes it hard for me to find time for some deep work in those days. Usually, as you said, right, you go through that day and then you come back at the end of the day and you're like, okay, now I'm going to write some of those technical specs or those PRDs. And that can get tiring. But there are ways to set those boundaries and be better at it. I know we talked about this a while back over coffee. Is just how do we block time in our calendar for deep work and have that as a non-negotiable in your days? Like, no, I'm not going to attend a meeting at this time. I need this time for me to actually do work, which will make me more effective in next meetings. So yeah, I mean, meeting fatigue is a thing. And I know we all feel it day to day.
Especially, I think it's been exacerbated with the pandemic and work from home and everything. So often people like will put like 30 minutes on your calendar just because they want to catch up. It ends up being like something you probably could have answered in like 5 minutes, but there's no 5-minute block on the calendar.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is just like meeting etiquette and a lot of just trying to make sure that you can set clear ground rules for folks when they set time on your calendar. Depending on what your project is, it's just hard to get rid of the meetings.
Yeah. And I'm trying to get better at this as well, is just blocking off time. Being open about the fact that, hey, I'm not going to be attending some of these meetings, bringing up the risks from that, being able to say why, and then just saying like, hey, I'm going to be doing some work here. And more often than not, people actually respect that. A lot of the times my own stories keep me from doing that when I'm like, no, but like, what will they think? Or like, what will the other stakeholders think when if I block off time? What will my manager be thinking about this? Like if I'm saying I'm not attending a meeting but doing work on my own. But everyone appreciates it. Everyone actually encourages that as well. So finding blocks for deep work, being okay with it, and then communicating out with the team like, hey, I'm not going to be here for this 30-minute or the next 1 hour block, and I'll come back to stuff after this. I think that's honestly doable.
Yeah. The stories that you tell yourself,
Yeah.
like, I think most people probably won't notice.
Yeah.
And if they do, they'll let you know. They'll ping you, they'll ask you to come to the meeting. And that's how you know you should be there.
Yeah, that's true. When the fires happen, that's a meeting that you don't want to be like, guys, someone else use the fire. I'm going to be in my deep work block.
But I mean, that's a good way. Just decline everything. If people like say, like, can you please join? Then you're like, yeah, you should probably go that one. But that's probably not like 80% of all meetings.
Yeah. Default no.
Yeah.
And then only respond yes if someone's like, where the F are you?
Yep.
That's not the way to go. I think another one that I get mostly from aspiring PMs and those who are trying to switch into product is, what are some of the best ways to craft your resume for switching into product management or jumping into a PM role? Of course, it's a deeper topic that I know we discussed that we want to get into in a deeper dive as well around this topic, but it's a question that comes up quite a lot. Are there any tips or any small things that you think are important for like crafting a PM resume for aspiring PMs?
Yeah. I feel like I say this all the time, but side projects, I think, are the easiest way to kind of like craft the narrative. But I think in general, like making the argument, like you've led teams, like you've led products, you've led initiatives, I think that's typically the easiest way to put it in. Also making sure that metrics are there.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, like a PM's whole job is just to push specific metrics. And if you can demonstrate that you've done that in previous roles, then I think that's probably the easier way to start the argument just to get the foot in the door. I mean, that's the whole point of the resume. It's
Yeah.
just to like get your foot in the door so that you can make your larger pitch when you get to the interview stage.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's very worth talking about is as a PM, you are doing so many different things, right? And so there are a lot of skills from other jobs that are transferable. And I think we sometimes limit our own thinking by saying, oh, I've been doing an XYZ, like a different role, and I have no skills that map to PM, which is not true. Like, I feel like every role out there has like a couple of skill sets that directly transfer into being a PM. I would highly encourage, folks to like take a look at their current roles and responsibilities, look at what usually the job description is asking for from a PM perspective, what you know about a PM role and what they need, and then try and find those overlaps and really highlight those overlaps. And I think any position you're at can really help. You can transfer some of those skills really strongly into PM. Like, heck, I was an engineer before becoming a PM, and I switched industries, I switched roles. And a lot of the things that I was doing as an engineer in my later stage of my career at that point, I learned skills that directly transferred into being a PM. So I feel like it's definitely doable.
There's just so much overlap for PMs and like all across different parts of the org. I think we all have those stories of like biz ops, biz strategy folks who are now PMs, or designers who are PMs, engineers who are PMs, customer service who are now PMs. Like it can come from anywhere. Because I think to your point, like there's so much overlap with everything, and there's so many different types of PMs. Right? There's a lot of PMs or a lot of engineers who are making tools, and if they want to go on the other side and start dictating which kind of features and elements to do, like they're the most technical background to also have a ton of good insight into how to do that. So a lot of times, like we think like PMs are like MBAs or business people or like some type of traditional background, but there really is no traditional background.
There is,
Because for me, like I'm more on the design side. I had my own company. I like went pretty heavily on the design, UI, UX, and got pretty good at that and got a pretty good intuition of how users interact with sites. Now I'm essentially a front end PM because of that, more of that design heavy background. But that's because I'm doing like more design heavy stuff. Right. If you're doing back end heavy stuff, if you're doing any of this thing that needs a specific type of insight that your background provides, it's a really good kind of segue to be that kind of PM.
Yeah. And I think when you're crafting your resume, those are the things you want to highlight. Like bring that story forward, bring those points forward, highlight that. Yes, you've done these kind of things that the team really needs from a PM, bring those up. Yeah. What else? Like, I think one last question that I've heard from a couple of folks is, what do PMs do in their free time?
Well, you know what I do in my free time.
Yeah, I know. Can I answer that one for Alex? It's side projects.
Yep.
Let me guess. No, is that anything else beside side projects, Alex? What else do you do?
No, they're all consuming. So that's literally it. What do you do?
What do I do? Besides when I'm not working on my product or I'm not being a PM, at work I'm being a PM at home. Just trying to like find ways to transfer those skills in my day-to-day at home. But jokes aside, I generally like reading up on a lot of the industry news that is happening in the space that I'm currently working in. It's just like that's one of the things I look at for a role is like I want to work in a space that I enjoy. So usually outside of my free time, I end up consuming some of that content anyways. I'm spending time there. Some side projects here and there, of course, not as much as you.
Well, I think it's kind of similar, right? Like you're looking at industry news and like essentially understand more about that industry.
Yeah.
For me, like especially in e-commerce, essentially like, the best way to learn is to be in business. And so like true. I have my own e-commerce stores. I can like run ads. I can essentially pull these levers that it's really hard to pull in my day-to-day role. So like I can move 1,000 times faster on my own. And so I can learn 1,000 times faster and I can then put those back into my day-to-day role. So I think part of it's like, if you're at a big company, especially, you just can't get the reps in. So in order to stay current, you essentially have to like do something on the side. It depends on the industry. Some industries like health, it's kind of, you probably shouldn't be doing too much on the side in that realm. But I think like any way to learn more outside that you can then kind of add to your role, I think is definitely helpful.
Yeah. But I mean, just want to say like, I think weird specimens in this space.
Yeah,
like,
I definitely
I don't think
agree.
This is like regular free time stuff. So
yeah, I think
not sure if you should take our side hobbies
because
ultimately
like in your free time you should do whatever like
you
makes
enjoy.
You happy.
Whatever
gives you joy. And for me, unfortunately, that turns out to be making more products.
Yeah,
it's an addiction. It's something I've always done, even before I even knew what a product was. But that's kind of unique.
Yeah, I mean, same here. Like I really do enjoy reading. I really do like just learning. So even if it's not something about the industry, I just generally enjoy learning. So like continuing education throughout, just trying to like pick up courses, pick up stuff that I haven't done before. But I mean, I also do love really playing soccer. So if I try and get that,
There you go.
if I can,
That's a normal thing.
yeah, no, it's everything's fine. But like if I try and get like a soccer game in, I love to try and find time to play soccer outside of work, and then usually trying to get more into like sports besides soccer. So I really want to like learn basketball. I feel like that's one sport where I feel really handicapped and I really want to be able to like play a regular game without looking like a total newbie. But yeah, that's some of the things. And of course, now that you've introduced me to this new app, I want to start walking more.
Oh yeah, step in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's one thing you do in your free time is you just find ways to walk more.
yeah, mostly like listening to podcasts or that kind of thing. So yeah, I definitely tend to walk a lot, but mostly to think about new product ideas.
I wish one day when you're like, what you do on the side is not a side project.
No, I've like figured out like the thing is like I feel so uncomfortable if I sit down and watch it like Netflix. I just can't do it. Like if I watch a whole episode, like the whole time I'm thinking about like how much time I'm wasting. And so then I'm like, okay, like if I play video games and like watch like listen to a podcast or like play video games and watch a course, like something like that, then I can justify it. But if I'm just like watching Netflix, I just can't even get through an episode.
Well, we should talk about that offline, outside of this episode. I feel like there's a conversation there that we might want to get into.
Yeah,
maybe.
productivity optimization is a rabbit hole.
I've had moments or like times in my life where I've gone deep down into that space, but I feel like I'm now trying to like step back a little bit more from that and continuously optimizing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to each their own.
Yeah, to each their own. Right. That's fair. But yeah, I mean, so I think that's like what do PMs do in their free time. Of course, not everyone's doing the same thing that we are doing. But yeah, that's some of it about what we do in our free time, I guess.
Yeah, but yeah, everyone's different.
I also do like hikes. Actually, I really enjoy hikes.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about doing ones, but we've never done them because I think you're usually busy in side projects. But yeah.
One day we'll get to it.
One day we'll get to it, yeah. And then I guess recording podcasts. Yeah. That's another one that we do in our free time.
We do. We've got...
talking about product outside of our day-to-day.
Yeah.
Nah, we need to find more hobbies. But yeah, awesome. I think those were some of the key questions. And
yeah, feel free to send more questions our way and we'll do another one of these episodes.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Talk to you soon.